Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are dialing in from. I want to say welcome to this panel, this amazing panel, where we're going to speak about the film, Lesbians Free Everyone. So let me just start by saying that this will be recorded, and just to the audience, it will be recorded via the panelists. So you won't be seen there, but you will have the opportunity to ask questions. So please ask questions in the chat box. We have a wonderful team behind the scenes, which are going to be able to push those questions forward, and we can ask our amazing panelists. So really, I wanted to just start by, by saying to you who I am, introducing myself. My name's Phyll Opoku-Gyimah. I'm the Executive Director of Kaleidoscope Trust, and I'm really super honored to be here convening a meeting with a group of such powerful lesbians to discuss Bev Ditsie's film, Lesbians Free Everyone. Now, in 1995, a global cohort of lesbians descended on the 4th UN Women's Conference in Beijing and made history. Bev Ditsie became the first out lesbian to address the conference, to argue that it was important to have sexual orientation included in any international norms. And this had to be related to women's rights, the rights of women. And while Bev was the voice in that space for global community of lesbians, there was also many lesbians that came together. So we look at Lesbians Free Everyone, which documents and has been created with such a noise, a powerful noise, and the level of the interviews that took place and the activists who were there. So let's start by introducing yourselves. I don't want to go through your long list of bios because we will be here all afternoon or evening with the amounts that you have all achieved and continue to achieve. So I'm going to start with Bev, and then we'll go round.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Lady Phyll. Hello, my family. I am so happy to be here. I'm very excited. My name is Bev. I am in Johannesburg. It is 6 p.m. And winter's coming in. And I am a filmmaker, and I'm an activist, and a musician. And yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Please, let's go on to the next. Julie.
Hi, everyone. I'm an old lesbian in this space. I currently am the senior advisor with the Council for Global Equality in the US, an activist. I've been an activist my whole life, as you can see on this film. And I'm just so happy to be here.
Thank you. Rebeca?
Hi, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity, and above all, thank you, Bev, for creating this space to reunite all these collective efforts, the results, and this conversation as well. So, my name is Rebeca Sevilla. I was born in Peru. I was part of the pioneer movement of gay and lesbians and feminist lesbians in my home country. I had been part of ILGA as an activist and in my capacity as co-secretary general. And currently I'm working for trade unions. I'm the quality coordinator of Education International, a global union federation of teacher organizations.
Thank you, Rebeca. And I'm going to move on to Gro.
Hi, everyone. Also, thanks to Bev, who actually is the woman who got us all together here today by making the film in the middle of a pandemic. Fantastic. My name is Gro Lindstad, and I am coming to you from Oslo, Norway. I was in Beijing almost 26 years ago. At that time, I was the leader of the Norwegian LGBTI movement. And I was doing that until 98. Currently, I am the executive director of FOKUS, Forum for Women in Development, working more broadly on gender equality and women's empowerment globally. And I've been active internationally all my life. So like Julia, I'm also one of the old lesbian activists.
Thank you, Gro. And Jessica.
Hi, everyone. I'm feeling very sad that we're not all under a lesbian tent somewhere together in person, but I'm really happy to steal the joy where I can. I'm Jessica Stern, the Executive Director of Outright International, formerly the International Gay and Lesbian Human Rights Commission, or IGLHRC. And I wasn't at Beijing, but I remember sitting in a campus classroom after hours at my local feminist activist cell and hearing about Beijing. And two of our brave senior members were going off to Beijing. And they came back so energized, talking about the power of this global movement. So I feel like I've been learning about Beijing my whole life. And I just want to say that I want to be Bev Ditsie when I grow up.
I'm with you on that, Jessica. So, I mean, look, I am in a space with greatness. And, you know, I'm looking at some of the messages coming through. We have got amazing people from all over the world who have tuned in to this conversation. So welcome to you all again. And thank you so much for being here with us. I'm going to go straight into the first question. And it would only be right to start with Bev. Now, Bev, we're 25 years on from this history-making moment in Beijing when you delivered a statement for lesbians on behalf of the International Gay and Lesbian Human Rights Commission, and with over 50 international organizations. Now, tell us, why was it important for you to make lesbians free, everyone?
Thank you, Lady Phyll, and thanks, and hello again, everybody. I see all of you, and I'm seeing these messages, and just I'm so happy. I'm grinning from ear to ear. I've been dreaming of telling this story. I'm a filmmaker. I grew up in TV and film, and since my first film, Simon and I, which was really about trying to kind of tell a story that I knew wasn't going to be told unless somebody actually did it. And I started taking it upon myself to tell these stories, also realizing that as feminist activists, as lesbian activists in the queer space, we rarely document ourselves. We do so much work in our own little corners of the world, but we rarely document. And what ends up happening is that we end up being erased. You have books that come out, you have all these things that come out all over the world, and a lot of the people who do the actual work behind the scenes very rarely get their flowers while they're alive, very, very rarely get the mentions. And so I'd been dreaming since the 2000s, I've been dreaming of making this film. And it just happened that we were supposed to get together in New York around this time last year, when I actually got the invitation to do a keynote as a side in one of the parallel conversations that was happening around Beijing 25 and CSW. And of course, when the world shut down, the question in my mind was, how are we going to tell this story? This would have been for me an opportunity to bring a small little camera and try and capture people's thoughts. I don't even know how it was going to happen. But as serendipity would have it, it just made sense that if we can go online and chat to one another, then surely we can record these conversations and put something together. And really, I didn't think again. I just made calls. I said, Phyll, Jessica, who can help me do this? Let's do this. And here we are. I'm really, really happy. I'm very excited. This is for me, I cannot even begin to take all the credit for it, because every single person who's here made not just this film, but my presence in Beijing as a 22-year-old, 23-year-old. And here I'm sitting with, for me, my own heroes, people who've been doing the work. And so I'm really, really excited and thankful that it happened, that we are here.
I promised myself that I would not get emotional until after the event, but you started already. You know, we are truly thankful for you with your thoughts behind documenting and archiving the storytelling and shaping the narrative, because they talk about if you don't tell your story, somebody else will tell it for you. So thank you. Now, Rebeca, I'm going to move on to you. Now, how did you all come together to fight for lesbian rights and visibility at the UN Women's Conference in Beijing in '95? What brought you all together?
Well, certainly, thank you, Lady Phyll. Certainly it was not an appointment that we made in advance. I think many of us have no idea about this process. I think Beijing is not a sole event about the rights. It's a process, long-term process. Depends from the perspective that you see it. Coming from Latin America as a feminist activist involved in AIDS and etc., involved in the lesbian feminism movement in those years, has been an experience that process that we were building up in the different UN conferences, Cairo, population, social and development, and Beijing was one of them. But also in terms of the feminist encuentros and lesbian feminist encuentros, because that's where we exchange information. That's where we build up some coalitions. That's why we build up allies with other feminists, with other organizations, gays, professionals. And I think some of us met at the ILGA conferences in different scenarios in the 90s. And I think in '94, when we have this New York Pride March, I think we reunite and with those lesbians who were there, they started to change information, I recall, and becoming to get more involved and set up dialogues on what we can do, working with allies, and trying to make our collaboration more close and agree on something that we can do together. And I think it's in those years, the same in the past, in Nairobi, in Mexico, the conservative forces or the right-wing forces were there. The fake news were there. But also we felt that there was a possibility to set back. So I think the conservative that is based on fear, greed, and division among people, as it didn't stop us to create a space to come along together. And of course, and in Beijing, some of us were there, but also it's important because some people that were not there were also working on that direction. So I think it was an interesting momentum, like the one that have in Nairobi or in Mexico or in Cairo or on the Human Rights Conference in Vienna. I think we were learning in those processes and we started to mingle about and building alliances. That's why I'm saying it's not as one sole event, it's a process that brought different people in different moments, and to have the chance to see them and have this dialogue is really, it's very special.
Beautiful. What I've just taken from that is that it was learning, building alliances, and you weren't brought together by appointment. So thank you. I'm going to move on to my sister in crime and a radical force, Julie. Julie, you said in the film that you weren't all there to make history per se. So what were you all there to do?
You know, you never know you're making history at the time. You only realize that afterwards. And this 25-year opportunity, or now 26-year opportunity to reflect, or the 30 plus years of Outright's existence, and this opportunity to reflect is how you actually pull out those moments where you realize you've made history. But you know, we were there to put sexuality on the agenda, right? Like, we really wanted to be visible, out, proud. We didn't use the word queer so much, but like, you know, we had a militancy in our spirit and our organizing that, you know, whose time had come. And you know, I think a lot about, you know, and we were there to have fun. We were there to meet. We were there to pull people together. When I think about all the different strains of activism that led to that moment, you know, it was a truly, you know, crescendo of solidarity and organizing and friendship. And that's actually one of the big things I keep thinking about, is even, you know, when Bev and I met in South Africa, where the sort of did it pull together with Gloria Cariaga, a panel in another conference about this moment, and the seeds of this film kind of sparked of like, oh my gosh, we really need to document this in a visual way, because we threw a bunch of photos up. You know, the reason we even had those photos was because we had stayed connected. And in the telling of that story, realizing pre-internet, you know, we were lucky if you had a fax machine back then. Like, all of our organizing really came from real personal relationships. And anyway, I just wanted to mention that because we're all still connected, and many more people, including many who are on this in the audience today. And it was a true collective effort of a lot of brave, courageous, outspoken lesbians.
Mm. Oh my gosh, how I wish I was at that moment. Like you said, Jessica, you know, and you said putting sexuality on the agenda and the militancy and in the spirit of it. So thank you. Now, Jessica, let's go on to, this is my other sister in crime here, who gives me a hard time, but you know, I love her even more for it. Jessica, this was really a historic moment for a number of reasons, but largely because the space in which it happened. Now, for those who are unfamiliar with the UN mechanisms, why is it important to advocate for sexual orientation in the UN Women's Conference specifically?
Well, Phyll, you must be taking this moment to torture me by asking me a really long and complicated question and giving me like 2 minutes to answer it. So I'm going to tell you after this. I guess I would start with the very simple fact that lesbians are not seen as women. And that was the struggle 25 years ago, and it's still the struggle today, both in formal UN documents, laws and policies by governments, and even at the community level. And, you know, we know this. We know that we're often seen as a political liability. We're seen as too angry, too hairy, too man-hating, too anti-family, too sex positive. And these are things that we hear from the opposition. And unfortunately, we also at times have heard this from the opposition within the women's rights movement, which is a complicated reality when the women's rights movement is where a lot of us have also made and found home. Mm-hmm. And so I think it was really important that this activism happened at the Fourth World Conference on Women, because we had to both show up in solidarity with those in the women's rights movement, and also be there to expand the definition of woman and expand the understanding of the range of women's experiences. And, you know, Rebeca, I think you're the one who kind of like just, I don't know, gives like a shout out to women's sexuality and lesbian sexuality at some part in the documentary, but it comes up again and again. You know, to be a woman often means that you're actually not entitled to your own sexuality and writ large, and sexuality should only be deployed in the service of heterosexual marital reproduction. And so, you know, it was very important to be in Beijing to fight for women's bodily autonomy, to fight for desire, and to name lesbian desire as a part of that, and all of the sort of forms of deprivation of human rights that come from that not being a part of your lived experience. And I just want to really underscore in this place in particular that I think sometimes the LGBTIQ movement thinks if we just eliminate all the sodomy laws, our work is done. And that's just not true. You know, if there's a huge range of laws, in addition to the laws that explicitly criminalize or minimize the experiences of LGBTIQ people that women live with every day, if we need consent from a father or husband to have the right to work, or freedom of movement, or if we can't pass our citizenship on to our children, then it's not that it doesn't matter if there's a sodomy law on the books, but our liberation is incomplete. So taking this political analysis to the global stage at the Fourth World Conference on Women was absolutely essential.
Beautifully put. Thank you so much, Jessica. And again, you know, I'm scribbling down notes because this panel is as much for me to continue learning from you all. You know, when you talk about lesbians being seen as a political liability, that really rings true, not just in Beijing, but here today in our very own movements as we talk about our rights and fight for them. Now, I'm going to move on to Gro. It's like, grow, you know. So look, we're having this conversation as part of the program for CSW, and you're part of the official Norwegian delegation for CSW. And you said you're here in part to help connect the dots. What's the connection between Beijing in 1995 and CSW today?
Well, you know, first of all, I think those of us who were in Beijing and who are here today and who are still active, we should look at ourselves as marathon runners, because we're still running to find the finish line. And that's something we haven't found yet, because what we started on to some extent in Beijing, we're still struggling to achieve. In many ways, we've gotten, the movements have gotten so much stronger in these almost 26 years, but the opposition has also gotten stronger. So when we're fighting, they're also using tools to fight against us. And I think part of what is important right now, and the reason for being active and being at the Commission on the Status of Women, is because there's a fight now to have a recognition for the intersectionality of women, seeing that there are forces who are trying to sideline lesbians and sideline the LGBTIQ movement, saying that we're not part of the women's movement, or that we're doing something to divide instead of uniting. So I think one of the struggles we have now is to also work together with women's movements and feminists around the world to say, we support them and their struggles are our struggles, but our struggles also have to continue to be their struggles. And part of being at CSW is now this year, I mean, negotiations went on this morning until 4 o'clock New York time, and they just started again a short while ago. And one of the hard issues right now is the rights perspective. and those rights are ours too. So we have to continue, and Jessica and I meet every year at CSW and see how we move forward, but we also pull our hair and say, what do we do now? But we have to keep on asking, what do we do now? And then come up and be creative. And we have to keep running.
Thank you so much, Gro. And, you know, we're just glad that you're there at CSW, still fighting the fight and making sure that it's understood through our intersectional lens and focus for feminists and women's rights across the board. So I'm going to ask, you all this question. Now, while much has changed for some people, much has still remained the same for many others. One of the things the film does really well is to provide a snapshot of what's happening around the world with LGBT plus rights right now. So for those of you who were there, how has your thinking evolved over the past 25 years? And I'll start with Rebeca, and I'll go to Bev, Julie, and Gro.
Thanks, Lady Phyll. And I think one of the major changes is the consensus that we have built along, I would say, beyond these 25 years in the struggle for rights and democracy and peace in our countries. Because for some of us, that was the context of our reason behind our organization, our motive to come out. So I think the consensus and the issue that the number of organizations in all the countries, independent of the circumstances they have set up, you can measure for the numbers of, one of the indicators could be the countries that have same-sex partnership could be an indicator. The countries that have decriminalized the laws, but the organizations that we managed to build, and also to take the space and the United Nations, etc. But I would say that in terms of the struggle for social economic rights in the local countries, this is a kind of still invisible progress, I think, because much attention is getting to the international arenas. But I can tell you that this is a lot. It's a lot coalition building between indigenous LGBT people and LGBT organization, workers and LGBT organization, trans organization. I don't know, the possibilities, the rainbow of organizations working for rights, democracy, and peace in different countries, take different formats. But I think this is a kind of way to build it up, our path for rights and peace for all. And I'm saying this because I think also in this COVID-19 pandemic, how show us how fragile are our democracies, how fragile are our public services, how poor or limited value we have for the people that care about us. I'm talking about the ranch of workers and also in terms of workers and non-workers, but also in terms of how challenging has been the life of many people within their own houses. I'm talking about LGBT people, but also women and girls. So I think it's, we make progress, but also the reality bring another scenarios that we need to tackle in our struggle.
Thank you, Bev.
For me, what's been really fascinating since making the film and having all these different conversations, because I had stepped away from actively participating in organizing and movement building for many years, since the last part of the 90s, and really focused very much on trying to infiltrate the media space, particularly mainstream and popular media, with just visibility, with queer visibility, with how things are being done behind the scenes. And so I arrived at this film and these conversations very disillusioned about what I was seeing around me. I remember even in some of my interviews, I would say things like, nothing's changing, nothing's moving. We are still in the same place we were in 1995. And of course, it would be my elders, my sisters, my colleagues who are saying, actually, Bev, no. Jessica is like, you talk about the seat at the table. We have a seat at the table. You know, Rebeca is saying, oh, there's inroads. Yes, we have moved so many steps backwards, but we've also moved so forward that we shouldn't take it for granted. And then, of course, in then completing the film and being in mainstream media with a title like Lesbians Free Everyone, was for me the most phenomenal thing. Mainstream news early in the morning, I would wake up because we had a huge publicity campaign when the film came out in October last year in Johannesburg. We screened at the Soweto Theatre for the first time, and all over the radio, Lesbians Free Everyone. My goodness, I just kept thinking, okay, 5 years ago, this would not have been possible. This is how far we have moved. Even just 5 years ago, I would not have been able to just be on just mainstream television on Good Morning South Africa and just be saying, oh yeah, no, we're talking about lesbian rights at the Beijing conference. And so it really injected a lot of optimism for me to be able to see that we actually have moved. I think, you know, with COVID highlighting all the issues, especially the systemic issues that we're dealing with, I really think that we are in a very opportune time to be literally making the changes that need to be made. I don't have all the answers. We are all having this conversation around how we're going to do that. But we can see that capitalism is a big failure. We can see how patriarchy is, may I use my language, bullshit. We can see how all of these systemic things that have been, that we've been fighting against, it's all now really at the fore. And you have so many more young feminist activists that are speaking out loud. We have, besides the Black Lives Matter, we have Me Too. People are not just letting things slide anymore. Women are not letting things slide anymore. It is, for me, an incredible time to be alive, even with all the difficulties that we are facing. Even with Kakuma camp still as it is, even with Ghana, the fact that these conversations are happening on a big global scale right now is for me a positive. And I'm beginning to see that. Sometimes I don't, but a lot more now. I am seeing that we actually have moved and we just cannot stop, as Rebeca has said. We cannot stop. For me, my connecting the dots is in the media space, is making sure that we are constantly in the space where we are a conversation and we are represented in the best ways possible. That, I feel, is my job, and I'm happy that I am being able to do it.
Thank you, Dr. Bev. Julie.
You know, the question of like, how has my thinking evolved over 25 years? It's a tough one, but you know, I think in the context of this film and the work that we all do together, I think one of my big lessons and takeaways is that it really takes all kinds of organizing at all different levels, but that ultimately real change in real people's lives happens locally. And that all the really, really important kind of global norm changing, consensus building ideas around rights is a very slow moving process, super important. And, you know, we can link from Cairo to Vienna to Beijing to New York this week. You know, all of that work, you know, thank you to everyone who does that. It's extraordinarily important. But where our movement really needs attention and resources is at the local level. We're just ridiculously under-resourced for such an important rights issue that is a life or death issue every day still. And that, anyway, so, you know, it takes all levels, but change happens locally. I think the biggest change over these 25 years, yeah, the opposition is saying the same stuff. We're saying some of the same stuff. You know, our thinking all has gotten more sophisticated, but where I think the biggest changes and evolution is around gender and our concepts of gender. And, you know, I'm so glad that Dylan Shalinsky's in this film, and it's just, you know, it's really, it's so phenomenal that we as human beings, I think, are in a moment that we can't see where we're going necessarily, which is why I love having queer youth in my life, in my family. My 2 kids are queer identified, their friends, like learning from this next generation about how they think about gender, I think is extraordinarily important for everyone of every gender and generation. Yeah, and we were youth back then. the ones who were putting sexuality on the agenda. We were actually, you know, we might still be young at heart, but, you know, there's something very important about looking and supporting the next generation. The other thing that I think that has changed for me over these years, I was thinking about my friend Chris Kovic's cartoon, Lesbian Politics, Arguing with People I Agree With. And you know, is to be really generous with your colleagues in this space. Like, we're in a moment where people have forgotten how to be forgiving and give second chances and help each other get over mistakes that we all make. And, you know, and what really matters are our relationships. We have real enemies out there, and our enemies are not one another. And so cherish your colleagues and be generous with each other. You know, the only other thing that I wish I had done when I look back is I wish I had kept a journal, because my memory is not so great. And I love having all of you to pull together this story and to be able to text Rachel Rosenblum, what was that woman's name? Oh, right, Zani Woods. That's who helped us get the lesbian tent. You know, write down your stories, connect with people like Bev to document them. Yeah, keep a journal if you're younger, because you won't remember when you're older. Anyway, those are some of the things that have evolved in my thinking over these years.
Thank you, Julie. Gro.
Well, you know, so much has happened in 25, almost 26 years ago. When I came to Beijing in 95, I'd been part of the movement back here in Norway. And in 93, we actually got a partnership law in Norway with the right to marry, as, you know, the second country in the world after Denmark. And that was a big thing. And during these 25 years, so much structure has come into place in so many countries on legal framework and rights. So much has happened on that. And we've become politically smarter. We've become strategically more smart, I think, in how we move forward, and also with the way we're much more connected than with, you know, like Julie said, we were lucky to have a fax. Now it's so much easier to, you know, share and talk and be jointly together and be a movement that is more globally than just struggling in our countries. And also seeing that some of the struggles we have nationally are also happening in other countries. But I think that one of the things I see where there still is a lot of challenge is in, queer people's daily life. Because for many young people, I see around me now, and like Bev is saying, it's so much easier to be recognized and be part of media and be part of everything else. But for young people, it can still be hard to, hold hands in the street or to be open, because there are people out there who still harass. And that has not changed that much in these 25 years, and still is a struggle because it's all about acceptance. Then one of the things I'm also concerned with in this pandemic is that as we're moving out, funding given by our different governments in different parts of the world will be less than what it was a year ago. And that will affect women's organizations, LGBTI organizations, and the way we work. We were marginally funded going into this. And I'm concerned with how we will move forward to support each other and to have funding. Lastly, I just want to say that when we came to Beijing, as has been said before, there was a strong lesbian identity in the 90s. And Rebeca and Julie and I had met at ILGA conferences and raised lesbian issues. And there was a lot of going on. In the years up until today, that lesbian visibility has been not greater, but it has in some way become smaller, because we're all in the gender and queer, which is great because it's inclusive. But I think what Bev's film does, which is really important, is to once again recognize the lesbian visibility and the lesbian identity and the lesbian important part of history.
Thank you all so much. And I can't help noticing that when Bev was saying lesbians, free everyone, we're all smiling. We're all so proud to be lesbians. I think at the end of this, I'm going to get us all to say lesbians, lesbians, lesbians about 10 times. So it's on the recording. Thank you for all the points made. And, again, I'm taking copious notes. And I want to move on to Jessica. Jessica, like me, we weren't at Beijing 25 years ago, but, you've been inspired by what's happened there. What impact has this had on you and your work?
I think the Beijing World Conference on Women was the first UN meeting I'd ever heard of. And I just can't emphasize the significance of what it meant to be 18 years old and to be sitting in a college classroom and to hear that the UN had relevance, and to know that the completely inadequate legal and policy framework in the United States did not have to be my only definition of justice or the only place where I could turn for an understanding of the rule of law. So I think, this conference, in a way, it has been a guide for me throughout my professional life. And, the part of what made the Beijing World Conference on Women visible to, a random person like me was that it left the elitist space of the UN and it actually became accessible. And one of the ways it became accessible was through the slogan, "Women's rights are human rights," which was said so loudly in that conference. I'd love to know from those of you who were there, how many years you've been saying women's rights are human rights before the rest of us caught on. But, for me going to school in New Jersey, that was the turning point. That was the moment when I had an understanding that the universal framework was supposed to also include people like me. you know, in preparation for today, I reread Written Out, this really lovely publication that I've been carrying around since the late 90s, and I've moved like 100 times. A beautiful publication, How Sexuality is Used to Attack Women's Organizing, produced by the Center for Women's Global Leadership and Outright, then Igelherk, under the extraordinary research and authorship of Cynthia Rothschild. And I read it, and I was so blown away by Cynthia's description of how the attacks on the work in Beijing are the exact same attacks as today. So Cynthia has this whole section on what they were saying. And, you know, the opposition said, you can't include sexual orientation. These are new rights. You know, we hear that today. And the right said, you can't include sexual orientation because the family will be under attack. And then they said national sovereignty. And they said, if you reference sexual orientation or gender or sexual rights, it could lead to, wait for it, lesbianism. It would literally produce lesbianism, because apparently heterosexuality is so fragile that the mere reference to any of these concepts in a UN document is somehow contagious. But, you know, in reality, you know, the platform for action was the most comprehensive expression of government's commitments to human rights for women and girls that up until then had ever been produced. So it was historic. It wasn't just another UN document. It took a giant leap forward. And there's all this beautiful language that you can read when you look at the 12 critical areas of concern, you know, clear recognition of violence against women, you know, clear discussion about stereotyping. So that language, Phyll, is actually so powerful that when we reached the 25th anniversary of Beijing, there was a sort of consensus from feminist community organizing that we should not reopen the Beijing Platform for Action, that if we were to reopen and try to renegotiate that text, we would not achieve today the high standard that was achieved 25 years ago. And I think that goes to Gro's point about how, you know, the opposition has gotten so strong, and we keep showing up in these spaces, but, you know, we need more change. We need change to accelerate for the sake of our community.
Yeah. Something, I mean, let me just stop, because you're talking about language and somebody's already said, Viva Cynthia. You know, the language that is being used even in the chat room, the amount of love that is being shown to you all, and people are thanking you for this conversation. It shows that lesbianism is needed. Most definitely. So, you know, again, thank you, Dr. Bev, for bringing us all together for this conversation. It's powerful, it's emotive, and it's, you know, it's nourishing and it's enriching right now. And I can't wait to even watch this back again. Just want to say to the audience watching, thank you so much for your comments. There's the opportunity to ask questions in the Q&A chat box. And also, if you are tweeting or on social media, please make sure you put the hashtag #LesbiansFreeEveryone, and we will find it and we will go and retweet and circulate it. So thank you, and keep the questions coming. So on that, you know, following that, Jessica, one of the things you've all mentioned is about the next generation, is about queer youth and how important they are in your work and what you do. And it reminds me of something translated from my language, Twi, which is from Ghana. You do not inherit this land from your parents or your carers. You borrow it from the next generation. And I guess what all of you have been doing is about amplifying voices, but also bringing others on so that they understand what has happened in the past, what is going on here today, and what the future should really be looking like. So thank you. I'm like, okay, I can digress. I feel like I'm just, you're all here in my front room with me, or maybe under that tent, right? So, Bev, let me come to you. you know, you've gone on this journey to document the biggest campaign for lesbian visibility in history. In having these conversations and in looking back this way, does something stand out for you that you really want to ensure others understand?
And I feel like I keep saying it over and over and over again. Solidarity. The solidarity that we experienced in Beijing, I have not experienced again. Solidarity from people I would have never imagined would be there. There was at one point what looked like very religious women in black who were at the lesbian tent who were saying, so what is this? What? And we're saying, well, sister, what this is you and me being able to actually live our lives outside of these patriarchal systems, away from these men. And of course, you know, as soon as people begin to understand that, oh, wait, there's been this whole misconception about what and who we are. And once people understand that, well, actually, you know, these are just women who love women who actually have and deserve their sexual autonomy and their gender autonomy and it was incredible to see. We were not just there celebrating, we were all there educating. And in the educating, we were also getting more and more allies in the process. I was fascinated by the amount of allies we had in Beijing, even just from getting the signatures that allowed for sexual orientation to make it into the platform was a solidarity that is, I don't know if it exists today within the feminist movement, maybe it does. But I really take away from that, for me, the solidarity. Well, of course, there were the parties. Remember, also coming from Johannesburg in 1994, 95, I had not been surrounded by gorgeous looking lesbians of all ages and of all creeds from around the world, you know? And there I was at the lesbian tent, and everywhere I looked was like a beautiful woman. Oh my God. You know, obviously there's like, I don't know if that can be recreated, but my God, it was phenomenal. It was really a good time. It really was. But really the solidarity, we are fighting amongst each other. We have these oppression Olympics. Meanwhile, the enemy is one. There's one enemy here. The patriarchy is a system that needs to be taken down. And we can't do it, you know, if we're using, as Audre Lorde said, the master's tools, which is to try and actually wedge between all of us and we're just taking it on. No. Our solidarity is what's going to actually ultimately be our liberation. And that's what I took from that. That was for me our success.
Powerful. I am snapping away here. So solidarity, and I guess this question is going to go to Rebeca. I remember meeting you for the first time when we were in Chile, a women's conference for trade unionists, and the solidarity that was shown, and also the love and connection that you gave to me when I first arrived. Now, Rebeca, in 1993, you're thinking back, don't worry. 1993, you spoke of enforced heterosexuality as being the only accepted model of life, and that we're living under a sexual dictatorship where one model exists. What else is possible when women break the rules?
I just would like to first agree with Bev on the issue of solidarity, but also the collective fun and humor that also help us to keep us the balance of these particular battles, I would say. And it's a battle because it's part of our daily life. I mean, all of us come from countries where, which has been organized based on family, extended family or nuclear families, and where men rule and women serve within the family, and we have to organize our small revolutions within our family at certain points. You know, leaving the family, getting more independent. And I would say, and this is independent of a generation. I mean, it's about our bodies. It's about our territories, connected where we come from. It's about, because our bodies is where we eat, where we drink, where we breathe, what we learn, where we read, or where we listen, and also what we produce, what we consume, what we waste. And we need to reflect on how to have more holistic perspective in the current times. And our struggles, personal struggles, and political struggle is about sexual rights and reproductive rights. It's about able to decide if we wanted to be mothers, and when and how. It's about to be free of violence. And coming from Latin America, it's amazing the achievement of the green wave of the Marea Verde in Argentina, and Ni Una Menos in Latin America. And I think our struggles, somebody was talking about the tables, that table is not enough. I think we have to go out of the tables. I think we have to take the streets, and women, the women's movement, including lesbian, are taking the streets in Latin America and in many other parts of the world. And also in terms of our body and our autonomy, it's about being free from poverty, hunger, or ill, etc. But it's also is what Julie mentioned. It's about, and also some Bev and others, it's about how do we take care of each other, care of the caretakers, care workers, essential services, respect the Mother Earth, the Pachamama in the case of Latin America, and their guardians, the indigenous people. I mean, it's like most women have not choose the roles. In the forces, the enforced heterosexuality is not only a problem for all lesbians, but for all women and girls. Everybody has a right to choose their own life. How do they want it to be? And I think in that sense, lesbians have and are still contributing to open up spaces to have conversation and to educate other young generation and citizens to have to learn to organize their life in a different ways. And of course, we have to still challenge the stereotypes, to share responsibility, and to refuse to be a bystander, to denounce and reject impunity in all grounds. I think it's the quarantine keep us in our homes, but our voices are not in quarantine. So we have to organize in order to get heard. And also, I'm just wanting to finish this with, I mean, coming from Latin America, when it came out in the period where a lot of kidnapping, missing and sterilized indigenous women was happening for thousands. I mean, no one, not 10, thousands. And still, justice has not been made for these missing people, missing women, sterilized indigenous, and many other violations. So to care for each other and seeking common spaces and seek for justice is still a pending work. And also is a good opportunity to join our forces where we are, and to keep together and as a collective effort. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Rebeca. Thank you. Gro, I'm going to come to you next. And, I'm really conscious of, I'm trying to fit so many questions in because when will I ever have this opportunity to have you amazing women in one space, even though it's virtual? So Gro, women around the world are fighting for change, and often at a great personal sacrifice. What would you say to them right now? What would you want them to know?
That they have to keep fighting because there is no alternative. You know, all those women who fight around the world at such great personal cost, they're my sheroes, because they do the fighting. They're on the front lines. They're in the rural areas, and they're all over the place. But the only way to move forward is to keep fighting. And like I was saying, I mean, it's like being involved and being a feminist. You have to be a marathon runner, because it's the only way you're gonna keep doing what you're doing. And it switches around. I mean, during all the years I've been active, it's been tough. It's been fun. It's been a learning experience. It's been frustrating. I wanted to pull my hair out. It's been meeting fantastic friends like the ones I'm sitting with here today. And you know, looking hindsight, it's been worth it. I mean, I'm still here, and I'm not still here because I'm the world's biggest masochist. I'm here because I think it's important and it works. And I have such great admiration for women who do this at such a great cost every single day.
Yeah, thank you, Gro. I can see Julie nodding her head when you're saying it's been frustrating, pulling out her hair, and, you know, it's this marathon. And I guess it goes back to the point Julie also made about, you know, let's not cancel each other. Let's have forgiveness in a space which is often so hostile to us. Thank you. Now, I guess I want to turn this over to Jessica. And I really wanted to ask you about, you know, again, being in a space with powerhouse lesbians who refuse to tone it down. What does that mean to you?
Well, Phyll, I'll just say very quickly, one, like being schooled throughout watching the documentary and this panel and this chat about how much work for so many, many, many years went into every moment of success, right? And there's comments by Charlotte and Susanna and Rachel and others saying, you know, Beijing looks great. It was an outcome moment, but there were decades of lesbians speaking out since the mid-70s, right? This didn't just happen. So I would just say, you know, I think one of the lessons I'm being reminded of is like persistence, patience, and tenacity. The second thing I want to say is I've seen 100 questions to you, Bev, about how folks can help with the distribution of the film. So I just want to say one of the other lessons learned is how our community wants to support you in this film. I hope you get to speak to that. And then, Phyll, you've been so kind and so generous, asking us all questions that make us look and feel smart and excited. But I want to actually ask you this question. How have you been impacted by powerhouse lesbians who refuse to turn it down?
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, I could gush for days over you all. And, you know, the learning, the teaching, as you mentioned, the schooling. I think it's about this courage that took to a global stage to demand visibility for lesbian women and for all women. You know, it's such a great example of what Audre Lorde said: your silence will not protect you. So to those of us that, you know, can speak and must speak, that's definitely taught me so much. I continue to follow all of your journey and to continually learn and also unlearn, because we often forget about the unlearning part. So thank you for teaching me the importance of raising voices, you know, and for working collaboratively and for fighting for all of our rights, and not just LGBTI plus rights, not just women's rights, not just girls' rights, but it all collectively. And thank you for showing me what real solidarity means, because solidarity is nothing without action behind it. But this is not about me. This is all about you. Trust Jessica to ask me the question. So look, I'm so conscious of timing, and I just want to keep you all here because, so I have like a last question that really goes to all of you, and just really quick fire, because I think we've got about 9-10 questions already in the chat. I couldn't keep up with the chat box because there's over 100 interventions and comments and praise. So, you know, the film closes with Daria Michelle Cave talking about the importance of not only exploring our sexuality, but also our sensuality and our spirituality. And to close, I'd like you all to say one thing that you do to ground yourself, stay motivated, and keep on pushing forward. And I know Gro started to mention this, but just one thing so we can go into the questions. I'm going to start with Rebeca, then Gro, Julie, Jessica, and then I'm going to end with Dr. Bev.
Oh, one thing, it's difficult. I would say a few. Learning, laughing, loving, take a break, care for people and the planet, and join solidarity actions.
Go on. Let's unmute our mics. We're in conversation. If we were in the tent, we'd be hearing lots of voices. So let's just
tent. Yay.
So Gro, do you want to go next?
Sure, I'll go next, and I'll echo what Rebeca says. And I want to, in addition to what Rebeca says, one thing that keeps me wanting to fight and want to be active is also being surrounded by young activists. That's the most motivating thing that I know, and having in my current place of work, interns or doing teaching moments or webinars or lectures, and having all the questions. And I was just the other night talking to, you know, youth activists who said, why don't we have this in school? Why is no one teaching us this? And then them being, so I think that's what inspires me. There are generations coming after us, and they're kicking ass.
Definitely. Julie?
Well, if I had to pick one thing that keeps me grounded and helps me keep going, it is hands down my loved ones, my family, and my family of friends. I could not have done any of the work I've done in this life without that support and love.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you, Julie. Jessica?
Phyll, you asked a bunch of rabble-rousing activists to follow the rules and only give you one answer?
But none of you have just given me one answer.
I'm being so good and listening.
Damn.
I'm gonna say, you know, mentors and elders, for sure, who school me, who hold me accountable, who inspire me, who shine the light, including all of you. And I'll also say wine.
Yeah.
I thought you'd say whiskey, Jessica.
Yeah. I'm dying for a glass. Where's the wine? You know, like everybody has said it, really for me, sisterhood is powerful. I grew up in a maternal home. My mothers, my sisters, really all my feminine people, even my queer family, like just laughing, love, laughter, that grounds me. My people ground me. I am very, very blessed to have lived the life I've had, where I've had so much love around me. My grandmother, may her soul rest. They're still here. They're all here. My mothers, my grandmothers, they ground me. I constantly have to keep connected to my spirit, because that is where my life force is. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful always.
I'm going to take a 30 seconds to also answer this. And I guess for me, it's about family, like Julie said, that have kept me going, but also those who have come before me. You know, I always mention that I stand on the shoulders of giants. And right now I'm in a room virtually, or a tent. I'm in a virtual tent right now with giants, and you know, you have kept me going, and I continue, and I'm going to say this again and again, to learn and unlearn from you all. And you know, with that learning and unlearning, it's helped shape my direction. It's given me even greater purpose, and it's shown me how to show love for our communities and our people. So thank you. I'm going to go into these questions now, because we have got, you know, not that much time. So look, let me open up these questions. And wow, so we have got from Eileen Wetherall, and I apologize if I got the surname correct. Bev, it's great to hear you sounding so positive. There seems to be so much discomfort in young women coming out now to identify as lesbian. Queer, gay, pansexual, non-binary, gender fluid seems to be more comfortable in young women, and even in women loving women organizations. It feels we are dismissed and seen as old-fashioned, stuck in the past, to call ourselves lesbian. Erasure of women and lesbians, the disappearing L needs to all stand up to address this before we completely, and I guess that was invisibilized. That wasn't a question, but thank you so much, Eileen, for that. I think that was a comment. I'm going to go through because I want to see where these questions are. So I'm going to go to Isabel. She says, hello, loved this panel, really inspiring voices. Can I offer 2 questions for potential Q&A? How do you see this work interacting with trans activism and working towards pushing for the recognition of trans women and their experience? And then the other question is, how can lesbian visibility movement teach and help those in the trans community? So this is open questions. I'm not going to put anyone on the spot unless it was specific, but please feel free to answer.
I'd just like to maybe I don't have all the answers, but really one of the things we were doing when we were younger in our activism days is that we had a little bit more patience in answering questions from people who were really clueless. And we found that we really got a lot of allies by just being gentle in how we were responding to people who had dumb questions. I'm finding that right now we are not able to respond anymore because we're so tired of answering ignorant questions, and we think that the ignorance, a lot of the time I've found that ignorance is not deliberate. People really have been like this and they've been indoctrinated. And then when someone is genuine in their asking what is happening, who are we, what's going on, that sometimes we actually do get allies by just being gentle in our responses. And for me, education, has been very much an opportunity of one-on-one being just able to respond to people. For me, that's what I learned in my younger activism days, that's how you get the flies with honey and not with vinegar.
Mm. Did anybody else want to, thank you so much, Dr. Bev. Does anybody else want to come in and respond to the question around involving our trans community?
I just had someone deliver lunch in the middle of a panel. I must be doing something right today. I'm so glad that our colleague asked that question. You know, I think that that there's so much work that needs to be done by lesbian activists who see the struggle of our trans sisters and our non-binary siblings. We know and see that you are on the front lines of vicious attacks today, not only by the so-called opposition, but by the so-called community. And it is disgusting, it is reprehensible, and we stand in solidarity with you. So I would just say, I think, you know, I think there are so many reasons that people who identify both as lesbians and as feminists need to work for trans rights and trans self-determination, that it's ridiculous that we even have to have this conversation, but we do. And so it's, you know, I think the question is, you know, how and where and when can we who are seen as lesbians, you know, use that platform to tell anyone who's expressing transphobic views, who identifies as a TERF, that there's no place for them in our movement. There is, however, place for trans liberation.
If I can just add to that and say that I think one of the things that we have to remind others of, and that you know, lesbians who I see who come out and criticize trans, which saddens me and frustrates me, we have to actually think back to how we were discriminated against, how we were harassed when we were coming out, when we were young. And it's the same mechanisms. So if we forget our past, and by doing so, stabbing others in the back by not standing up for them, how did we back then ask others to stand up for us? Because it's the same that we have to do as someone else did for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Gro. Totally echo, you know, what's been said. And it also has to be okay for there to be a lesbian identified agenda. And there's been so many places where it's really hard and it feels like we're competing with one another when it's really a both and. And we also need to be okay with not diluting what really needs to be a more visible and overt lesbian agenda by conflating it with everything else or it disappearing. And, you know, so I think there's an understandable tension and there's no perfect answer to that question, but yeah, we're evolving together, echo everything else. And we also need to be able to make space for ourselves and our rights.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I'm going to go back to a question Eileen put in the chat, and I realized that our wonderful team at Outright and Kaleidoscope Trust have managed to answer some of the questions. Clearly they knew that I would go over and want to be talking to you for a lot longer. So Eileen asked, how can we make the term lesbian more attractive and visible for young? I know, I love it. Well, I'm an attractive lesbian. Very proud. But how can we make that term more attractive and visible to young and women of all ages while being accepting and respectful of the differences and different ways of calling ourselves? And I guess this is to all of us. We're all attractive lesbians, you know, and I think secretly I'm gushing over all of you. We've all got partners, maybe, but you know, we can find ourselves attractive and be proud to say we're lesbians. So I'm going to open that out to all of you.
Lesbian. I'm sorry, it's sexy. I'm a lesbian. You know, it's very interesting how we actually, I asked this question in the film. It ended up not making it into the film itself, where the question was, are we being invisibilized? What is it about the word lesbian? Because even I would say, you know, oh, I'm queer. I don't use lesbian so much. But then even trying to kind of type out, like while I was filling out forms to get archive footage and trying to like, the film is titled The Beijing Retrospective. Because, you know, just the knee-jerk reaction from people is seeing the word lesbian and then having like a reaction. But more and more and more, I say lesbian. And I don't even say lesbian, lesbian. It's obviously we are so hypersexualized. It's very kind of, you know, porn. I don't know if you know that on Facebook, we have the lesbian, the film, the title of the film, as a page, and we are not able to, on Facebook, you can't register the word lesbian. That's another fight. You can't register the word lesbian. It violates the policies of Facebook because lesbian is pornographic. And so you can have homosexual, you can have everything else except for the word lesbian. So we haven't been able to register the word lesbian on the Facebook page. So I think on the one hand, you don't want to kind of go too sexualized because then that is like, you know, falling into the realms of voyeurism and pornography. And yet at the same time, we are sexy, we are beautiful. I love it. I'm sorry. I've always loved this word.
Well, so do I. You've just given, I feel like I'm in a very different panel session and all of a sudden, and we then like say lesbian. Actually, you know what? Unmute yourself. We said we're going to say this word about 5 times. Come on, let's all say it. This is being recorded.
Sexy, please. Let's say it's sexy. Yes.
Well, yeah, I'll leave that to you. After 3, 1, 2, 3. Lesbians.
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 Lesbian.
Oh, I love it. I absolutely love it. Thank you. Oh my gosh. I obviously you can tell that I'm enjoying myself, and this is why people don't always ask me to facilitate or moderate, because I just take it to a different place. But the love in the chat is great. So look, we're coming to the end, and I know that there's so many things people want to ask, but I want to end on this last question that is to you, Dr. Bev, and it's been in the comments here. How do those who have not watched the film access the film? How can they watch it? How can they share it? How can they hold panel sessions like this and invite you to it? How can they just view it and enjoy and feel emotive and passionate and absolutely beautiful after watching such an amazing film?
Well, we have the site, lesbiansfreeeveryone.org. The site is a home for the film. You know, it's interactive, so anyone can leave a comment, send an email, and I respond to all emails. I'm really, really excited every time someone wants to share the film. It is, you know, available. I will make it available for anyone. And if anybody wants to have a conversation, absolutely, you're welcome. And we will obviously invite the participants of the film who many are here. I am so happy that so many, I see Lepa, I see Charlotte Bunches here, I see Kasha in Uganda, I see Rachel, I see everyone. And whoever is available can be available to be on a panel as well. I am really pushing to distribute the film through the different film festivals that exist. There are already a few that are interested. And so if any other film festival, whatever connections you have, please just make a note, drop us a line on the website, and I will respond with the rest of my team. And yeah, the film is there to be made available because I do love to share it and I think it should be shared.
Brilliant. And I guess lastly, you know, from Outright International and Kaleidoscope Trust, we are ever so grateful that we got the opportunity to be part of supporting your work. This was needed, this is needed, and I know Jessica and I have really tried to ensure that whatever we do it in a collaborative fashion, and we make sure that we support our movement. So thank you very much, and I am giving you all your flowers whilst you are here, not when you're gone, but recognizing and acknowledging you all. So look, in closing, and I've still got questions that I want to ask you, and I'm sure the audience do as well, but they can all reach you at particular places, and we will circulate this with also your social media handles and your organization's websites. But in closing, I want to thank you all for this wonderful conversation. It's been rich. As I said, it's been nourishing. It's been powerful. And Bev, Julie, Gro, Rebecca, Jessica, thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for what you continue to do always. And I am inspired by you. And I know many others are as well. So thank you for being here. And good afternoon and good evening to all of our audience. Thank you for taking part in this amazing session with amazing people. Lesbians and solidarity, love, compassion. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, all.
Thank you. Thank you, Bev.
Good job.
Thank you all.
Thanks all.
Let's meet again soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.